The Toronto Raptors made a big trade today, acquiring Jakob Poeltl from the San Antonio Spurs. And while I still think this was a great trade for the Toronto Raptors, filling that big hole we've had at the center position for the last couple seasons with a legit starting center in the NBA, looking at the other trades that went down today, looking a little bit deeper into the open market as well as other reports that popped up in the last 24 hours, it seems like the Raptors may have overpaid for Jakob Poeltl. So we'll take a look at how the San Antonio Spurs may have finessed the Toronto Raptors a little bit ahead of this year's trade deadline. Additionally, an offer was revealed from the Toronto Raptors to the LA Clippers, a deal that involved Fred VanVleet. So we'll take a look at that and gives us some insight in terms of Fred VanVleet's trade value ahead of this year's trade deadline. And a former Toronto Raptor also was released today that has some Toronto Raptors fans turn their heads saying, hey, should we pick him up? And we'll break that down as a whole bunch more in this video. So without further ado, let's jump to the first topic of discussion. The first thing we're taking a look at is why the Raptors may have been finessed by the San Antonio Spurs in this trade negotiations, the trade packages. Now, the Raptors, again, I'll reiterate, I thought this was a good trade for the Toronto Raptors, giving away Khem Birch, 2 second-round picks, as well as a protected first-round pick to acquire Jakob Poeltl from the Spurs to be our new starting center, I'd imagine. And looking at Jakob Poeltl's stats, again, these indicate why he'd be a good fit. 12 points per game, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. Masai Ujiri talked about his hopefully getting to pass a little bit more, play that Marc Gasol-esque role. He gets 1 block a night, but is a very solid positional defender. He can finish around the rim, and while he's not a great free throw shooter or a jump shooter, he's a guy that definitely fills that need we have as a defensive center. Yes, Christian Koloko can do it some nights, but he's just a rookie. Rookie centers tend to foul a lot. We saw it with Yak in his rookie season, right? There's a lot of growing pains at the big man position, and Jakob Poeltl's a polished, true starting center in the NBA. So, by no means was this a bad trade, and I don't want to indicate that this is a bad deal, but I sort of indicated in the last video we put out, there was a couple things that confused me regarding Masai Ujiri's decision-making in today's trade deadline. I don't think it was an overwhelming disaster by any means, even if there's a bit of confusion with the direction of the organization. The asking price for Jakob Poeltl that we met, a first-round pick in 2024, given the fact that we are currently a lottery team, right? That's the position we're in right now as, this draft is only 1 year out. A pick that's only protected between 1 through 6, those top 6 slots in the NBA draft, is a very valuable asset. So the Raptors may have overpaid when you look at the open market. Now, first, it was revealed the offer that the Raptors were competing with. And in my opinion, it wasn't even close to what the sort of Toronto Raptors were able to give up. They were offering Peyton Pritchard, who's a guy that's basically out of their rotation. Very good. And Toronto Raptors fans might say, hey, Peyton Pritchard's great. Ben, what are you talking about? He is elite when he plays the Toronto Raptors. Yes, he's had his moments with the Boston Celtics, knocking down threes and stuff, but he is currently not a rotation player for the Boston Celtics. So not a major asset there. Danilo Gallinari, as well as a couple of second-round picks. So the Spurs declined this. And mind you, the Toronto Raptors also had multiple second-round picks in their deal. So that's what we were competing with. That was the big offer that the Toronto Raptors were sort of up against. So there's that. And just on face value, the Raptors crushed that deal out of the park. Now, maybe the Spurs wouldn't have even accepted a little bit more, but it seemed like, given all the reports leading up to the trade deadline, the Spurs wanted to get off. They were worried about Jakob Poeltl leaving in free agency, especially if they landed Victor Wembanyama in the draft. So it's they wanted to trade Big Yak, and the Celtics were the only real reported suitor ahead of this year's trade deadline. So we didn't have much we were going up against. But then you make it a little comparison with guys in the open market that have similar stats to Jakob Poeltl. Now I'll show Yak's stats back up on the screen again. 12, 9, and 3, 1 block a night. And then you compare that to a guy that was I'll just show Mason Plumlee's stats. Another guy that was traded today, who's averaging 12 points per game, 10 rebounds, not as many blocks, but similar amount of assists. They basically have almost similar percentages. They're both around the 60% in terms of free throw shooting. Neither are three-point shooters. And Ben, some people might say eye test. Oh, Mason Plumlee is not nearly the player of Jakob Poeltl. And career-wise, I definitely agree. But Plumlee has grown a lot this season, or at least put up some remarkable stats for the Charlotte Hornets this year. Now he's been dealt to the LA Clippers, and his open market value was much different than Jakob Poeltl's because he was sent to the LA Clippers in return for Reggie Jackson. Some people might say, hey, Reggie Jackson's also a guy that's pretty valuable and stuff. And some people are saying that a pick might have been involved in it as well and stuff, but there's like a second round draft pick or something like that. But essentially, Mason Plumlee was given to the Clippers for basically nothing, because what did the Charlotte Hornets do with Reggie Jackson at this point? Well, the Charlotte Hornets and guard Reggie Jackson are likely to agree on a contract buyout. So Jackson will be among the point guards in the open market that will prioritize contending Hornets set up to play younger players down the stretch. So Mason Plumlee was a guy that was traded for a guy that was bought out. You traded Mason Plumlee, a guy with very similar stats to Jakob Poeltl. Now, I do think Jakob's the better player. Positionally on defense, he's a significant step ahead of Mason Plumlee. But again, very, very similar numbers, similar size, similar frame, all that sort of stuff. And Mason Plumlee was given up for basically nothing. Maybe a second round pick. Legion Hoops basically said that it's straight up for Reggie Jackson, a guy that got bought out. That's not a lot of value in return. And you see what the Toronto Raptors had to give up. I'm not counting Khem Birch as a very valuable asset, even though I love Khem. Again, all the greatest respect. I don't like that he's kind of getting washed over, that he's sent away, but just given his current injury situation, he's a null asset. But 2 second round picks, as well as a first, I feel like Masai Ujiri could have talked his way down. At least the protection on that pick talked it down a little bit, right? Like, that's the sort of stuff you got out there on the open market. So that's my one big gripe, and the Toronto Raptors may have overpaid. And again, people are speculating whether or not the Spurs have something over the Toronto Raptors, because they've dealt away 3 first-round picks in the past, or 4 first-round picks in the past, in the Masai Ujiri era, I believe, and then 3 of them have gone to San Antonio. One in the Kawhi trade, one in the Thad, and now one in the Jakob Poeltl trade. So if they want a first-round pick, they're getting them from Toronto. So I think it may have been a little bit of an overpay. I just wanted to sort of make that take, because I was a little bit shook about it earlier, because I want the Raptors, and the main reason I was a little bit fired up, because I want the Raptors, they're going to go in that win now direction, to add some other players to the bench. And this is the big gripe I've had. Even though I'm happy with the position we're sort of in, the Raptors aren't offered anything significant for guys like OG, Gary Trent Jr., or, to become sellers in the market. It doesn't make sense to do bad deals to get rid of your guys. But if you are going to go in the direction of buying, we had 2 major holes out of this year's trade deadline: the center position and getting someone to back up Fred VanVleet. Someone Nick Nurse will actually play to get minutes. And then you look at a deal for a guy like Bones Highland, who was sent to the LA Clippers for just 2 second-round picks. Now, I know Masai Ujiri had to deal away 2 second-round picks in the Jakob Poeltl deal, but if that's all it was for Bones Highland, right, and the Nuggets are sort of win now, could we not have given them a bench piece, right? I know there were talks we were interested in Bones, but the Nuggets sent him to a division rival. Now, maybe they look at him as a locker room cancer or something like that, because they had a little bit of a falling out in the front office, and they're trying to implant him in the LA Clippers. That's my conspiracy brain going. But 2 second-round picks for a guy that could have been very valuable off the Toronto Raptors bench. Now, maybe you could say, hey, Nick Nurse wouldn't play a guy that doesn't play defense like that. Fair enough, all that sort of stuff, but I wanted a bigger boost on the bench, and I got a bunch of just guys that were sort of traded for nothing, right? Like, you look at Mo Bamba, he was sent away for Patrick Beverley, another guy that was just straight up waived, and now I'm not going to sit out here and argue that Mo Bamba's even comparable to Jakob Poeltl, right? Like, that's Reggie Jackson's stats, but Mo Bamba, 7 points, 5 rebounds, a block a night. Some people are high on him, but even getting him off the bench or something, if the asking price is Patrick Beverley and a second-round pick, like, if that's the sort of going rate for your centers now at this point, I don't see why we had to give up that much, that lack of protections on a pick for Big Yak, even though I do think Yak is a great player and will be a huge piece for this team. So it's not to diminish the acquisition of him. It's just to say, Masai Ujiri, get finessing a little bit on that front. Went on a little bit longer rant than I expected to do on that, but if you guys are interested in sports, we got more topics to cover, but if you guys are interested in sports betting, definitely check out the Cool Bet Sporting Book. They're a sportsbook regulated in Ontario, available all across Canada. You can bet on every single Toronto Raptors game, NBA game, and any sporting event really in general. And now with the Toronto Raptors sort of rejuvenating their team, acquiring Jakob Poeltl, giving up a lot of assets to sort of start that win now trajectory, the odds might be looking pretty good because the Raptors haven't been that great, but they might be racking off some wins in the coming weeks. So if you want to bet on the Toronto Raptors, definitely do it using the Cool Bet Sports book. So shout out to Cool Bet for supporting the podcast. But the next thing we're taking a look at is Fred VanVleet had little trade value ahead of this year's trade deadline. Now, Fred VanVleet is a guy that I've been backing immensely over the course of this season. I still think he's a good player. I think he's a legitimate point guard. Yes. The biggest issue I've had with him is his regression on the defensive end, but even that's looking better as of late. But the big question again with this team right now, Jakob, Poeltl, Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, all potentially unrestricted free agents this offseason. And the Raptors are definitely taking calls in terms of potential moves that could go down. And one move was leaked in terms of what the asking price was for Fred VanVleet from the LA Clippers. And I believe it's this one. Yes. So the Toronto Raptors wanted Terrence Mann in a deal for Fred VanVleet, but the Clippers refused, according to Zach Lowe. Now, other reports have said that the Raptors also wanted some draft compensation. So Terrence Mann and draft compensation. Now, personally, I look at that deal and I know a lot of people just want to get off of Fred. So I'll get roasted in the comment section, I know for it. But this guy was an all-star last season. He was an all-star last season. He's putting up like 20-7. On the year. Knocks down his three-point shots. He was a quick guy. He's championship tested. He's performed in the playoffs. He's done his thing. And yes, he has his inconsistencies. But Terrence Mann? Like, the Clippers are turning down Terrence Mann for Fred VanVleet. Sure, Terrence Mann's a young prospect. He can shoot the ball and all that sort of stuff. But I'm happy the Clippers didn't accept that deal. I would have been a little bit shook accepting that kind of package there, but I don't know. It does indicate that Fred VanVleet did not have that much trade value, and it makes it interesting in terms of how much money he's going to command in the open market. But I guess if we know the Orlando Magic are going to give him one of those max contracts, then the Raptors will have to do it too if we want to retain him. So maybe it was this or nothing or whatever. The Raptors didn't have a lot of leverage, but did give us some insight in terms of Fred VanVleet's trade situation. Would you guys have accepted or gone after the Terrence Mann and a pick? Maybe the pick into it, first or something, but I don't know. Maybe I'm too high on Fred VanVleet. But the final thing we're taking a look at in this video is Serge Ibaka, now a free agent. And, the legend, Serge Ibaka. He is, a report has come out that, my camera's gone. I'll just keep this up on the screen. I don't know what happened to my camera there. But the Pacers waived Serge Ibaka, allowing for the veteran big man to hit the open market. So I'll see my camera came back. It did not come back. I apologize for this. I'm deep into the video here now. But basically, I'd like Serge Ibaka to return. I'll keep this on the screen. That's very weird. But I'd love for Serge Ibaka to return to the Toronto Raptors. Not even because he's having a great season. Not because, he has barely played for the Milwaukee Bucks. But I'd like to have Serge Ibaka back on the roster just to up the vibes of the team. We're trying to be back in win now mode. The vibes have been off with the squad. So bringing back Serge Ibaka would be great. But apologize for my camera going off there. It's too deep in this video to edit back. But you guys are the best to make us far. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I think the camera might have died, actually, since we've had so many videos out today. This is the fourth one of the day. But, folks, you guys are the best to make this far. I think that's a sign I got to turn it off, go to bed. I'm signing out. Cheers.